So I just want to welcome everyone to today's Leadership in Action Lunch and Learn webinar. This is the first part of our Preparing for Professional Life webinar series. And today we will be discussing interview skills, resumes, and cover letters. And I would like to welcome all of our collegiate and alumni members. And I would also like to welcome any alumni and volunteers from Hobie, our philanthropic partner. We appreciate all of you attending this webinar today. And as we said, happy Founders Day. We thank you for spending part of your Founders Day with us. And we want you to take the time today to celebrate with your chapter and other Phi Sigma Pi members across the nation by reflecting on how you can continue to live into the Phi Sigma Pi mission daily of improving humanity with honor. So for some logistics for today's webinar, if you have any questions during the webinar, you can ask them in the Zoom chat box that is on your screen that you are using. And you will also be asked to answer some questions throughout the webinar. So please use your chat box during that time. There will also be some poll questions. And during that time, you can pick one of the answers by clicking on your screen, or if you happen not to see the poll question pop up, please type your answer into the chat box. And now I'd like to introduce our alumni panelists for today. First, we have Taylor Brock from the Alpha Xi chapter and Amari Daniels from the Beta Mu chapter. So Taylor, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Hi guys, my name is Taylor Brock. I'm a career advising fellow at Elon University. This is my first professional role after I just graduated with my MEG in higher ed from UVA. And I'm about to go through the interview process myself, so it's exciting to talk about it now.
Awesome, great. Thank you, Taylor. And Amari, would you like to share a little bit about yourself?
Hello, everyone. My name is Amari Daniels. I'm an alumni of the Beta Mu chapter at George Washington University, currently the social chair with the Capital Alumni chapter in Washington, D.C. I'm a journalism and communications major, had about 3 or so roles since graduating in 2012, which now seems like ages ago. And I'm actually about to start a new role this upcoming Tuesday as a copy aide at the Washington Post. So I have a little bit of recent experience about going through the interview process and tailoring your resumes and cover letters, and hopefully I can share that with you all today.
Great, thank you so much. So I am going to turn off our videos so we can get talking about our process today. So give me one moment to do that. And then also we have some poll questions to get started. So first, I want to know who is here. So if you can just chat in your in the poll question, or if you can't see it, chat in the chat box. Let us know if you're a collegiate member, an alumni member, an honorary member, a Hobie volunteer, a Hobie alumni, or a non-member. I'll give everyone a few moments to do that. All right, looks like everyone has answered, so I will share these results with everyone. So we have 37% of our collegiate members, 32 alumni members, 11 honorary members, and 21% of us are non-members. So hello and welcome everyone again. And then I have 2 questions to kind of get us warmed up talking about interview skills and resumes and cover letters. So the first one is, have you used the career services on your campus or have gotten assistance with your resume, cover letter, or interviews and interview skills? And this doesn't have to be recent, within the past week, just ever. Have you ever gotten assistance? And while we're taking this poll for any of our new attendees who are logging on, feel free to chat your name and chapter in the chat box. All right, it looks like we have everybody. So we have some great results here, which I'm sure Taylor and Amari would love to see that, yes, 90% of us have gotten help. So that is a great start. It is something that everyone I think needs assistance with, and we're gonna be learning a lot from Taylor and Amari today. And then my last question before I turn it over to these two is, do you currently have a Phi Sigma Pi leadership in action and or hobby listed on your resume, including on your LinkedIn profile? And this could also be any other volunteer experience or organizations. All right, great. Looks like everyone has pretty much voted. So again, we have some wonderful results, and we have 79% of us that said yes and 21 has said no. So great. For those of you who do have them, wonderful. We're definitely going to be talking about how you can perfect that today. And for those of you who said you don't, we're going to be talking about how you can add it on and boost your resume up. So I'm going to turn this over to Taylor and Omari now. So Taylor and Omari, I'll let you take it away.
Thanks, Casey. So first step, we're gonna talk about resumes because they're the first step in the job process. So we're gonna play resume bingo. In the chat box, you will find a link shortly with a bingo card specifically designed for you. And so these are some things that should be on your resume or how your resume should be formatted. And Casey is going to go ahead and call some bingo to get us started.
Yes, so this is a great little interaction we're going to have today. So if you want to click on the link that is in the chat box, once you click on that link, you're going to click Generate Card, and then you're going to click the link that says, okay, got it. And then that's going to take you to your bingo card. And we're going to definitely play for one bingo, if not two, depending on time. So I want everyone to, whoever calls bingo first, you are going to win a Leadership in Action water bottle. And like I said, we might play for two, depending on time today. And yes, the link should be shared with everyone, but let me just reshare it again, just to be sure, to make sure everyone has it. Okay, I think I resent it, so I'll make sure, does everyone see the link now? And again, you're gonna click on that link, you're going to click Generate Card, and then you are going to click OK, got it, to get your specific bingo card. And reminder to call bingo in the chat box. I will be looking for that. And we're going to be playing traditional bingo today. So either get 5 across, 5 down, or 5 diagonally. And remember, everyone's going to have their own unique bingo card, so not all the elements that I call will be on your card. So if everyone's ready to go, I will get started. And as we call the different elements, Taylor and Omari are going to be talking about each of them and why they're important for your resume. So if I can have people in the chat box who have their bingo card up kind of give me a yes, we're ready to go, we'll get started. All right, I'm getting a lot of ready to plays. I'm excited. Okay, so we are going to start with our first element. That is going to be skills. If you have skills on your bingo card, check that off, and then I will turn it over to Taylor and Omari to talk about it for a little bit.
So skills should be something that's the last thing that's listed on your resume, but it's an important part of your resume. A lot of times when I'm working with students, they highlight their soft skills or their power skills on their resume, and those should be only valued in your bullet points. Only hard skills such as computer or language proficiencies should be listed under your skills section.
Great.
And
oh, go ahead, Omari. Sorry.
just going off of that, when more often than not, when you read a job description towards the end, it will often list what kind of skills or requirements they would like you to have, such as your computer, laptop, desktop, Microsoft Word, Office 365, things like that. So you want to make sure that when you add your skills on your resume, that not only is that something that's applicable to you, but that it also lines up with what the employer is looking for before you apply to that position.
Great. So now we're going to go into our next element, and that is leadership experience.
So leadership experience is another section that can be found on your resume. This can highlight your different leadership qualities that you have in specific organizations, including Phi Sigma Pi. You should list out all of your titles that you've held throughout your time in Phi Sigma Pi. I held 3 positions, so I have all of those listed on my resume.
And just adding to that, in particular, one thing that employers look for, they look for employees who are good at working in sort of a team environment, because more often than not, you'll be working with a set group of people, but they'll also be looking for those instances where you've kind of risen to the occasion and been able to work on your own, because they'll be looking for someone who's versatile, who's able to work in a leadership position, but also in sort of a team environment as well. So you definitely want to highlight any experience that you have working as a leader, because there may be instances that come up where you need to only work by yourself and not necessarily have that immediate backup of your staff or your team with you. So definitely highlight any times when you work on your own or in a leadership position.
Great. Next is 1 page.
So your resume should be 1 page when you submit the document in your application materials. However, you can have what's known as a master resume that lists everything and all things that you've ever been involved with, so you don't ever forget anything that you've done. But having that master resume, you're going to pull from those experiences and put it in a 1-page document. You can format your resume to have smaller margins or smaller font size to make it fit on 1 page. We don't want to go smaller than 0.5 inches of margins all the way around, or smaller than 10-point font.
And just to add that, I would definitely say more often than not, you'll typically keep your resume to 1 pages. I think the only instance where you might go over it is if an employer asks you to include your list of references. Sometimes they'll ask for the resume, the cover letter, and the references to just be one document. And in that instance, then you'll have to go over 1 page, because you won't end up listing your references and your cover letter and your resume all on 1 page. So in those instances, that's when you'll go over. But like Taylor said, there'll be instances where you'll have like a master resume, or if you have more certifications or more degrees, that might call for you to go over. But more often than not, you're typically safe just having a 1 page.
These are great tips. I hope you guys are learning a lot and getting close to maybe getting a bingo. Right, our next is degree title.
So I see a lot of students come in and they say they have listed on their resume major in and then their major. It's more professional to have listed your exact degree that says on your diploma. So I have a Bachelor of Arts in English. So how I would have that listed on my resume is literally say Bachelor of Arts, comma, English. And then I have my concentrations underneath there, and then my minor as well.
Yeah, I would agree with what Taylor said. And also just because that's going to be one of the conversation and talking points during the interview. Like, why did you pursue this major? Why did you pursue this concentration? Because a concentration or a minor might not be specifically tied to the profession or job that you're looking for, but it will help show that you have experience in other areas beyond what the employer or the job is looking for. So definitely make sure to highlight that.
Definitely. All right, let's do our next element here with work experience.
So work experience or relevant experience is something that a lot of the students that I work with get hung up about. They think that just a paid position is work experience, and that is so untrue. Any experience, internship, paid or unpaid, even sometimes your involvement on campus can be classified as work experience. So if you've only held 1 paid position and it's been working at a restaurant or something, and you want to highlight your other skills that you've gained throughout your collegiate experience, that can go under work experience as well.
And one thing to keep in mind, just going off of personal experience, there's usually the temptation to list work experience in the order in which you held that position. But employers will usually want to see the most recent thing you have. So you want to make sure that you're working from recent to backwards. So definitely list your most recent position that you had. And like Taylor said, if you have any sort of volunteer experience, throw that on there, because if you have any sort of kind of a gap or kind of a break in between positions, that's something that employers are going to ask about. They're going to want to know, why is there a gap in your resume? What were you doing in between that time? So if you have any sort of freelance position or volunteer work, it doesn't have to be a typical 9-to-5 position, but something that shows that you're not just keeping yourself busy, but that you're doing something in between those periods where you're looking for work. So if you have any sort of volunteer experience, freelance work, anything like that, make sure to throw that in there, because it'll still show that you're keeping yourself busy in that period when you're looking for full-time work.
Awesome. So I'm going to send out the bingo link again for anyone who's joined us a little bit later into the webinar. Welcome. So there's a link in the chat box if you want to join in with playing resume bingo with us. Just click on that link. Then you're going to click on generate your card, and then you're going to click on the next page. Will take you. You'll say, okay, I got it, and that'll give you your card. We have the first 5 called items up on the screen for you to click off on your bingo card if you have them. So welcome, and the first 2 people who call bingo in the chat box will win a water bottle. So let's continue on with our next element for our bingo, and that is certification.
So certification is something that can be classified as under skills as well. But this is anything that you've done professionally. I have that I was LGBTQIA allied trained under my certification. That's something that could be beneficial in working with students. Also, Excel is a big thing that we're seeing a lot of students getting certified in, and a lot of employers, especially in the business field, but all over as well, that are looking for certification in. We actually have a class here at Elon that you can take that will get you certified in Excel.
Yeah, that's definitely something that will go in sort of the other or skills or kind of extracurricular activities, because going off of that, if any sort of certification you have, even if it's not specifically tied to what your position is, an employer or a hiring manager might look at that and ask, what is this? What is, leadership in action? What is this certification that you went through? And it might turn out that the skills that you learn from something like an LIA or anything else that you've gained certification in might give you skills that will be applicable to the position that you're applying for, or in any other instance where the job will require you to do something. So definitely make sure that you have a certification listed. But yeah, definitely put that more towards the skills area of your resume.
Great. And Laura put in the chat box that green dot training is also a common one offered for college students in a certification. Thanks, Laura. Next, we have our GPA.
So for all of the brothers out there, I know your GPA is higher than a 3.0, so congrats on that. So you should all have your GPA listed if it is higher than a 3.0. If it isn't, it's something that can be left off on your resume.
I do think that the further away you are from your college career, and this is going to vary from person to person, if you're maybe a couple of years away from college, I think the GPA might start to matter less and less, and it's going to look more towards your professional experience, but definitely more so if you're kind of a new graduate or just fresh out of college, then your GPA, especially if it's particularly high, is definitely something to highlight on your resume. But I think the further out you go and the more time that you spend away from college and more in the professional world, that the GPA may not matter as much. But I think early on, it is definitely something worth highlighting.
Is anyone getting close to bingo yet? Let us know in the chat box. Okay, next we are going to call volunteer experience.
So volunteer experience is another category that can be listed on your resume. can highlight your extracurricular experiences and something that shows you that you're giving back to a community other than just for professional development experiences.
It also shows that you take service seriously, and that is one of our tenets, fellowship, leadership, and service. You want to make sure that you're highlighting that service experience, that you're giving back to a tenet of your community. So again, it doesn't have to be a 9-to-5 job. It doesn't have to be something where you're getting paid to do it. It's something where you're giving of your own time and your own energy to be helping someone else, and that's definitely something to highlight.
Okay, we'll go on to our next one, and that is no template.
So I see a lot of students, they come in, they either use Canva or a Microsoft Word template. It's very, very hard to reformat or add more experiences to if you're using a template. So just go ahead and start just with a blank Word document and formatting it that way. That way it's easier to add more things to as you progress in your career.
It's also something because your resume may slightly change as your career, as your professional life continues, and you may end up tailoring certain words or particular highlights on your resume based on where you're applying. So there are certain experiences or words or phrases that you use that as you move on, you're going to want to tailor those to the specific position that you're applying to. So it does help to just start out with a blank Word document and then just add on to it. Make it sort of like a living document where you can constantly change it depending on where you're applying.
Okay, and next we are going to call action verbs, which I'm going to put a great resource that Taylor shared with us into the chat box for you to review.
So action verbs are obviously verbs that are used to start off any bullet points. They really show the action that is being done. So when we'll talk about this a little bit later, but when you're creating your bullet points, you want to really visualize what you are doing in that moment and showing the employer that. The list that Casey just shared has them broken down into different categories that you can use to start off your bullet points. You also do not want to use the same verb twice in a row or have the same verb multiple times throughout your document. So having that list is very helpful to add variety to your resume.
And this is something that also applies when you're writing your cover letter, to make sure you use those certain action verbs. But just something I want to add to action verbs, you want to make sure that you're using certain words like increase or improve. When you're in an interview, a hiring manager will want to see that when you were at a previous position that you helped increase something. So if you can add in a word, like say you improved something by X amount or any sort of percentage or number, something that's quantifiable, you want to make sure that you're putting that in your resume because it'll show that you had an impact where you last were.
Great, and I want to say congratulations to Nick. He called bingo, so hooray, we had our first bingo, and for the sake of time, we're just going to go with the one bingo. So congratulations, Nick. I will contact you afterwards to make sure you get your water bottle. So we're going to continue on with the webinar. So here's just some other elements that should be on your resume, and we can talk more about these in the Q&A if you have any more questions. So there is also education, your name, honors and awards, your LinkedIn URL, and having the correct tense. So as I said, if you want to talk more about these, you can ask questions in the Q&A section when we're done with the content. So we're going to move on to our next slide.
Employers typically spend only 10 seconds looking over a resume before they judge whether or not they want to hire you. So we're going to only spend 10 seconds looking at this resume and then answer a poll question to see if you would hire Nora.
Okay, I'm gonna leave it up for about another 2 seconds and I'm gonna click off. So I'm gonna bring up the poll as to would you hire Nora? Just by looking at her resume quickly. We're getting a mixed bag of results here. We'll give everyone another 10 seconds to answer the poll. And again, if you happen to not seeing the poll on your screen, please feel free to add, say yes or no that you would hire Nora in the chat box. All right, looks like almost everyone has voted. So I will end the poll and I will share the results. We were very close. 60% of you said yes, you would hire her, and 40% said no. So I will turn this back over to Taylor and Amari.
So some of you obviously caught the typos in her resume, but from just looking at her resume, it's pretty good formatted, standard, but there is a couple things that I would want to point out to make you guys aware of. We're going to look at the header that includes her name. She has her URL for her ePortfolio, her phone number, her email address, as well as her physical address. Now for your physical address, I tell students you can leave it on there if you are applying for a job that is close to that address. But if you're applying for somewhere further away, it can be left off. So if you're looking to save some room, you don't have to have your physical address on your resume. But this header should also be included on your cover letter. The next section on her resume is her education section. So just as I said, spell out the actual degree you are receiving. And then she has the month and the year that she's graduating, her GPA, as well as the school she attended, and her honors and awards. She has her high school on there. As you get further out, you do not need your high school on there because graduating from college proves that you either got a GED or graduated from high school. And then the skills section, her skills section features hard skills, but it's in the middle of the document, so I would prefer to see that towards the bottom of the document. Mari, do you have any other comments you would like to add?
I would concur about the high school portion. Much like the GPA, at least for me personally, the further out you get, your high school degree and your high school education is not going to matter. It's more going to be on your collegiate career or your graduate degree. The skills portion is something that will go towards the end. You can definitely put the leadership and the work experience a lot higher. That can probably go after the education part. The class projects could probably go along with the skills as something kind of extracurricular that you worked on, but just some general things that just need to be shuffled around.
And Laura, I see you did mention that she needs to quantify things. So we're gonna talk about that in creating and writing bullet points on our next slide. So when creating and writing bullet points, we always wanna use the STAR method. So S and the T stands for situation and task. So you wanna set up the context for the story that you're trying to portray in your bullet point. The action tells the steps that you took to make the situation possible, and the R shows results and positive outcomes that led from that experience. This is an example of a really good bullet point. So it's taking a bullet point that just said tutor students in biology and made it into instructs approximately 5 students per day on cellular and microbiology concepts to ensure preparedness for university exams. So this person improved their bullet point by telling them the number of students they did, they tutored, how often they did, and then what subjects they did, and then why they did it. A lot of times, the students that I work with will leave out the why. A good linking phrase to show the why is the words to ensure or in order to.
Just to chime in, I would probably argue that the results and the why might be the most important part of the bullet points, because if you don't include the why, it's kind of like telling a story but leaving it at a cliffhanger ending. The hiring manager or the employer, when you're having the interview, when they're going over things you did, they want to know the results. They want to know what was the end goal. What results did you produce as a result of the work you were doing? So when you're going through your bullet points and you're describing the actions that you went through, you want to make sure that you're producing results, show what was the end goal, what came out of your work, and you want to make sure that you're adding that.
Now, as we go on to our next section of cover letters, I'm going to chime in here with another poll question for everybody. So I'm going to bring this up onto the screen for you now. And the poll question is, do you have a basic cover letter written to be able to change and to add for each job that you apply for? Give everyone a few seconds to answer this poll question. Great, looks like almost everyone has voted. So we will end these results and they are pretty close. So we have 57% of you said yes and 43% of you said no. And I will turn this back over to Omari and Taylor.
So it's good that you have the basic concept of a cover letter drafted, but we do want to tailor it for each opportunity we're looking for. And to tailor it specifically to the top skills employers are looking for. So according to NACE, the National Association of Colleges and Employers, these are some of the skills that employers are looking for in candidates. If your bullet points and experiences in your resume and cover letter can demonstrate these qualities, you are going to get hired. So the first one is teamwork, and then there's problem solving, communication skills, leadership, and analytical skills. Now there's more skills, but if you can demonstrate not only in your bullet points, but also in your cover letter throughout your experiences, you're most likely going to get hired.
Just going off of having a sort of basic template when you're writing a cover letter, is especially when you're applying to multiple jobs, there is a temptation to sort of just use the same kind of, at least speaking for me personally, there's a temptation to just have the same sort of introductory paragraph, and the closing of the cover letter will basically be the same for every single position that you apply to. It becomes very mechanical. But as you go along with the application process, you learn that employers are looking for very different things, and you want to make sure that you are tailoring your cover letter to what that specific employer wants. And you also want to make sure that you mix it up. You don't want to just have the same sort of introduction or even closing that you used for one position and then use it for another, because one position may interest you more, and you might want to look into that position. You might want to learn more about it. You might want to make sure that you're showing your interest. You want your interest to be reflected in your cover letter, so it's making it a little bit more dynamic, and it's not just a simple copy and paste from one cover letter and put it into this one.
I think that is a great segue into our next slide, which is showing you a chart that I created to talk about cover letters and the skills pulling from your specific job description. So I'll explain how to use this. So the first, in the top left-hand corner, it says employer and position. So you can write out the employer's name and the position title. And then looking at the job description, write out the skills that are needed for that job on the bullet points. And then on the right-hand side, under the positions you've held, this lists a position that you've held. And then experiences that align with each of the bullet points that you already listed from the skills from your job description. So an example in my own life, I'm currently in a fellowship and applying for full-time employment come May. So I applied for an academic advising position. One of the skills talked about one-on-one advising. So in my current position, I am a career advising fellow, and I meet with students of all years and majors to explore careers, review resumes and cover letters, and conduct mock interviews. Mari, do you have an example how you would use this?
Definitely. The position that I just applied for that I'm actually going to be starting is a copy aide position, and a lot of it involves a lot of administrative responsibilities, helping out with printers, setting up meetings and sending out calendar invites. Basically, a lot of responsibilities that requires you to be very versatile. And because a lot of that had been done in my most previous role, working as a contractor, you're able to transfer those skills and use that as experiences that you can use that match up with the job description. Also, make sure that when you're adding in the stories from experience, make sure that it is something that you can explain and you're not just putting in skills from the job description into your cover letter or your resume just to make it match up. Because more often than not, employers are going to ask you to elaborate. They're going to ask you to explain something, and you want to make sure that you actually do have the relevant experience to explain what it is that you did at a previous job and how that applies to the skills that the current job is looking for.
So this is an example cover letter, just to show you the exact formatting. So in the top left-hand corner, you see the address of the person and the date. If you have that header from your resume on your cover letter, which is a good match, you don't need that extra address on there. So that'll serve as your address section. You still do need the date as well as the person's address and their company as well. You also want to actually address your cover letter to a particular person, not to whom it may concern. That's like the death of a cover letter. If you are having trouble finding the person, look on LinkedIn as well as the company's website, or you can even call the HR department and see who's going to be reviewing applications. But if you're unsure, you can also just address it to the most high position. And then in your first paragraph, you're going to want to introduce yourself as well as list the name of the company and the position. In the middle two paragraphs, you're going to want to explain an example which you've used those skills that we already listed out. And each paragraph should only contain one experience or one skill. They can be different skills. So in one paragraph, you're going to have one experience, and in the second paragraph, you're going to have another. And in the last paragraph, you are going to say, thank you for reviewing my applications. If you have any further questions, please do not hesitate to contact me, and include your contact information, even though it's listed in your header.
Yeah, just to add on to that, something I learned from a panel at the National Press Club in downtown DC, when you're going through the job search, you definitely do not want to put something like, to whom it may concern, or dear hiring manager. You want to make sure that you're putting in the legwork to show that you're researching who it is that you're going to be working for. And sometimes it's going to be challenging. Sometimes you might not always find the name of who might be your direct supervisor. You might not be able to find someone. You might want to put the name of the person who works in HR, someone who you think might be reading over your resume or your cover letter, but you want to make sure that you're putting a name to it, because otherwise, if you're just putting something like "Dear Hiring Manager" or "To whom it may concern" or "Dear Sir" or "Madam," it feels very impersonal. It feels very cold and clinical. You want to make sure that you're putting in the extra legwork, adding a name to it to show the company that you've done your homework when you're applying to the job. In the first paragraph, yes, you definitely want to make sure that you're mentioning the name of the company and the position that you're applying for. You don't need to say, "My name is," "I'm excited to be." They already have your cover letter. They already have your resume. They know what your name is. Obviously, you're excited to be applying for the position, obviously, because you wouldn't be applying for the position in the first place. So you don't really need to add any sort of fluff or, "I'm, very thrilled to hope to be working for you." You just want to get to the point very quickly. You want to show that you're excited for this position, show that you have the necessary experience, and you want to make sure that you're explaining that in the following paragraphs. You want to give them, very strong examples of experiences that you have, where you went through a period of growth, where you worked with a team, when you went through a kind of a challenging obstacle. These are the instances when you're going to want to look back at the job description and make sure that what you're describing matches up with what they're looking for, because they're going to want to make sure that you have the experience that matches up with what they're looking for in the position. And in the final paragraph, you want to include your contact information. You want to make sure that you're being not necessarily assertive, but you want to be confident. Don't say something like, "I hope to hear from you." Say, "I would like to hear from you," or "I'm looking forward to hearing from you." You include your contact information so they have a way to get in touch with you, but also that you're hammering home the point that this is a position that you really want. So you want to make sure that you're very confident in your closing, because that's going to be the last thing that they read. So you want to make sure that you've left a very strong impression and that you have the necessary skills and are the best qualified candidate for this position.
Elizabeth had a question that says, does all the address info still need to be at the top, even though most resumes are submitted online? Yeah, it's just kind of like a formality thing to have on your resume. It shows that you know how to format a letter correctly. So I would say, yes, still include the actual location, even though you're submitting online. Networking is also a big part of this process. It's not always about what you know, it's about who you know. They can often give you some leads on jobs. I recently met with the Associate Vice Provost for Student Success at Virginia Commonwealth University in Richmond, Virginia. And I spoke to her kind of just in general about my career aspirations. And then I was looking through VCU's website and saw that there was a position open. And in my cover letter, while I was applying to that position, I mentioned her name and how I had just spoken to her. And then they gave me a phone call a couple days later to ask me to interview for that position.
Yeah, definitely in this day and age, especially with how connected everyone is online, the connections that you have with people, if you already have, and it does sound kind of strange to say, because you want to make sure that you want to go in based on the strength of your own qualifications. But if you have an in, if somebody already works at the company that you're applying for, that's an extra person that you have, because they can ask questions about the position that you might not be able to ask. And LinkedIn is definitely, you want to make sure that you have a LinkedIn page regardless of what you're doing when you're applying for a position, because you're able to view profiles, you're able to look in and see who currently has a position that you're applying for. That allows you to do your research on the company. It allows you to do your research on the person who might be hiring you for the position, who might be interviewing you for the position. It might allow you to look on who currently has the position, and then you're able to speak to those abilities because you've done the research that shows that I know that this person currently has the position. Can you tell me a little bit about the responsibilities and what they do and how success is quantified? So you want to make sure that you're definitely staying connected. And no matter how small the role is or the person that is, any any and every connection does help. So it definitely does help, network or go to events. When you're having an interview, make sure that you get, their business card, because you want to make sure that you can follow up. You want to make sure that you've left that long lasting connection with them after the interview is over.
So I want you to think about somebody who you have connected with in your industry, or somebody that you think would be able to help you in the future. You don't have to really type in the chat box their direct name, but if you just kind of want to share with us and share with the other attendees here, somebody you connected with. And remember that you're already a part of a huge network of people just being members of Phi Sigma Pi. So being able to reach out to other members and talk to them, you have a great in and a great opening line, all being brothers of Phi Sigma Pi together. So if you would take the time as we go through the interview portion to just kind of think about that and share with us in the chat box somebody, or how you've connected with somebody in the industry you're working in currently, or how you to get into the industry you want to be in.
So we've reached the last step in the hiring process, interviews. So before the interview, you need to do a couple of things. I like to create what I call fact sheets, which has everything I ever want to know about the position and the company and the department that may be useful to bring in an interview. And I also use this fact sheet before writing my cover letters. So in this fact sheet, it's just a blank Word document with bullet points that includes the position title, the department and the company that you're working for, the mission, vision, and core value statements of that company. The job description is helpful to have as well too, because oftentimes you are going to apply for a job, click submit, then the portal will close and you will never see the job description ever again. So if you have that job description pasted into your Word document on your fact sheet, then you can have it to look over right before the interview. Also, if you know who is going to interview you, it's helpful to have information about them listed, such as their names and their title. And then also follow the company on social media and include any recent happenings that occurred. If like you're working in business and a merger happened, that would be nice to know, to be aware of going into the interview. And then things you need to be aware of before the interview and be ready to answer is why you want to work for this employer, what this employer has to offer that other employers don't, what the employer prides themselves on, and why you are the best applicant for this position.
Just to add to that, in a way, you almost want to go into the interview knowing more about the company than the person you're interviewing, because you want to make sure, follow, like Taylor said, following social media and any recent happenings, show that you're keeping up to date on the company and its daily business. You want to make sure that you're able to not necessarily go and just spitballing random facts, but you want to make sure that you've done your homework. You want to make sure that this is a company that you have a very vested interest in. So you want to make sure that you know almost everything that you can from top to bottom. You want to know about their employer. You want to know their name, but you also want to know, how long they've been in the position. This is also where LinkedIn comes in, because on LinkedIn you can see a person's work history and how long they've been in the position. So then you're able to ask them questions about, what brought them here, what makes them stay here. You want to make sure that you're asking the interviewer questions that's going to make them think, but also just shows that you have a lot of interest in this particular employer and you have a certain set of skills that you can bring to it that would put you ahead of the competition. Because again, you want to make sure that you're leaving a long-lasting impact, because employers have a lot of people to interview, and more often than not, they also have people who are internal hires. So you want to make sure that you go above and beyond and demonstrate that you are the best candidate for this role, and how you're able to align your values with what this company wants.
So I have 2 poll questions for you. The first one is dressing for an interview. So How should you dress for an interview? Would it be business professional, like the picture on the screen in a full suit, or business casual, more like polos and knit sweaters? Give everyone a few moments to answer this. Give everyone about 5 more seconds. Okay, great. Let's share our results. Most of you said that you should be dressing a business professional in a full suit, while some of you said a business casual. So I will let Amari and Taylor talk briefly about that before we go into the next poll question.
So Catherine brings up the very point I was going to make. It's best to dress more formal than you regularly would for an interview. However, do some research on the company. If the employers typically dress more casual, it's okay not to wear a full suit.
Yeah, definitely going on that. Find out what it is about the organization's style that, I'm sorry, Taylor, I saw you respond. Did you have something else or?
No, I'm good.
Oh, just going off of that, definitely look into the organization, see if they have a dress code, but you want to make sure that you're going in basically as formal as possible, even if the position doesn't call for it. Like example, I used to work at a museum, and in there because you're required to stand on your feet most of the time, you're usually going to wear tennis shoes, but you're not going to wear tennis shoes going into the interview. So you want to make sure that you're going in a business professional as possible, even if the actual responsibilities of the job might call for something completely different.
Great, and let's go into our last poll question for the webinar. And this one is, should you hide tattoos and visible piercings for an interview? Yes or no? Give everyone a few more seconds here. It looks like almost everyone has voted. So I will share these results now. And again, the majority of you said yes, and some of you said no. So I'll turn it back over to Amari and Taylor to talk about this.
So again, do your research. If it's a more conservative company, you may want to hide them. However, if you plan to have them visible on a normal workday, then make them visible during the interview. If showing your possible future employer who you are during your interview, and if your tattoos and or piercings are part of how you express yourself, then do not hide them.
And I saw Liz's question about wouldn't it depend on the type of position, and it definitely does. If you do end up getting the position, usually they'll explain a dress code if tattoos are allowed or not. And I have one friend I used to work with at the museum, and she has tattoos, but for the purposes of the position, because we were working in visitor services, she had to cover the tattoos up. And even before that, she had to cover them up during the actual interview portion. So if it is part of how you express yourself, like generally shouldn't be an issue, but I think for the purposes of kind of maintaining a professional demeanor, it might not hurt to cover them up, but you also want to explain beforehand that, hey, I have tattoos. Is this going to be a problem if I do get the job? And from there, then they'll let you know if it's going to be okay to show any tattoos or piercings that you may have. So you want to make sure that you're asking about it as well.
So the most common and the very first question that you get asked, tell me about yourself. So you should include your full name, your first and last name, the current position you are holding right now, and why you're interested in working for the company. And then also include something that's not on your resume, something a little bit more personal about you that they might remember. I have one of my colleagues, he mentioned that he can ride a unicycle. So they remembered him on the first day. They were like, oh yeah, you're the dude that could ride the unicycle. So including that is something to make you remembered by your future employer.
Just adding to that, and this is something that, depending on your chapter, you can actually borrow from Phi Sigma Pi. I know for our chapter, we usually have a speed dating event during recruitment, and one of the things that usually comes up during icebreakers is to name a fun fact or just something completely random or out there that something that's definitely going to leave a lasting impression. And if that's not on your resume, if that's not on your cover letter, you throw that out there because that's going to be a good jumping off point. That's going to be your conversation topic that helps get the ball rolling. And if you have some sort of nervousness or kind of anxiety going into the interview, just throw out something fun in there. You want to make sure that you're easing the tension and really just helps you just kind of ease into the whole interview process so you don't have that nervousness on there, so we can kind of break the ice. Sort of like when we go through rush events and we want to make sure that potential new members are as comfortable as possible. We want to welcome them into the fraternity. You want to make sure that you're doing that same thing when you're going through the interview process. You want to make sure that you're as comfortable as possible and that this person who's interviewing you has a good sense of who you are outside of your professional life.
Taylor, I heard that you have a kind of unusual interview question. Do you want to kind of quiz our attendees with that?
Oh, yes. Okay. So there's kind of two types of questions. There's behavioral questions and then there's case questions. But one of the questions that I always like to ask students that you might get in an interview is, how many windows are there in New York City? So if you could just respond by typing in a number or your response in the chat box, how would you respond to that question if asked? Elizabeth says too many. So enough to cover all the buildings, 10 million, a lot. So these types of questions, interviewers ask these so you can show how you are thinking. It's not about the exact answer. You're not gonna get, like, they don't know how many windows are in New York City. So if you show your possible employer your thought process when you answer this question, then you are successfully answer the question. They don't really care how many windows are in New York City, I guess, maybe if they were a window washing company or something, but they just care how you think and approach uncertain situations.
Just going off of that, talking about uncertain situations, one question that I found, especially recently in interviews that comes up, is employers like you to describe a situation where you either were working under pressure or, more specifically, a time when you may have failed at something. This isn't necessarily to say that you're bad at what you did, but employers like to see how you rose above adversity. They like to see how you're going to deal with a very challenging situation, how you dealt with something when you didn't have an immediate supervisor to talk to, when you didn't have team members to go to, when basically you were put in a situation where you may have come up short, where you may not have been able to completely help achieve the goal that you were trying to reach, but how you rose above that. They like to see that you're able to come into those situations, but be able to handle them under pressure and maintain composure. So if someone asks you a question, if an employer asks you to name a time that you failed, just be honest about it, because they want to see that you've dealt with situations accordingly and that you're able to work under pressure.
Great. So as you go ahead, Taylor.
Shared a link to a great resource that has some interview questions listed. Did you share that?
Yes, I did.
Okay. And there's also on that guide a list of questions that you should ask employers as well in the interview process.
And to go off of that, along with that resource that we shared, we also have a wonderful leadership in action module that is professional etiquette, answering the tough questions, that also goes through that as well. So that module is a great starting point to kick off a cool scholarship event that you could hold for your chapter. You could host that module and then have someone from your career services organization on campus come and speak to your chapter, maybe even possibly look over your resumes and cover letters and give you some great feedback on how to make them as perfect as they can be. So does anyone have any questions for Taylor and Omari for today? I'm going to bring back up their video so they can talk with you one-on-one. If we don't have any questions then today, then I just am going to thank Taylor and Omari for joining us and sharing all about interview skills, resumes, and cover letters with us today. I hope you learned something out of this. I know I definitely did. And if you do have any follow-up questions for either of them, I'm going to ask them to put out their emails in the chat box, and they said they are welcoming any questions, follow-up questions that you may have, that you could reach out to them and also connect and network with them as well. You will also be able to watch and share this webinar on our YouTube page at youtube.com/Phi Sigma Pi and on the Phi Sigma Pi Facebook page. You'll also be getting a copy of the email. You'll be getting an email copy of it, so share it with your members or fellow alumni, coworkers who weren't able to join us today. And please take the time to complete a short survey that will be put into the chat box as I'm speaking, and also on the email that you will be getting afterwards. We like to hear back from you and making sure that, tell us what you liked about it. Tell us any topics you would like us to cover for future webinars. We definitely want to hear your thoughts on that. And thank you again for participating, and congratulations, you have earned 8 Leadership in Action points. Remember, your goal is to reach 75 points to earn your Leadership in Action certification, just like Taylor and Omari have done. And remember, you can earn more points by participating in the Leadership in Action modules, monthly tweet needs, lunch and learn webinars, and the Leadership in Action challenges. And as we discussed this afternoon, LinkedIn is a valuable tool to use when looking for a job. It is your online resume. So I will share the link in the chat box for you to take the Leadership in Action challenge and watch a video about how you can add Phi Sigma Pi and add Leadership in Action onto your LinkedIn profile. And once you do that, you can share it with us and you can earn 2 Leadership in Action points. I'm going to add that into the chat box now. And our next tweet meet is coming up on Friday, March 1st, and it's about how to get into summer internship. So again, this is kind of playing off of what we talked about today. And that again is taking place on March 1st at 7 p.m. Eastern time. And you can register for that at phisigmapi.org/tweetmeet. And I welcome you to join in the more webinars in the Preparing for a Professional Life series. We are just getting started. The next Lunch and Learn webinar will be on Thursday, March 14th, again at 12 p.m. Eastern time on the topic of networking. And the conclusion to the series will be on Friday, April 12th on the topic of professional communication, where Taylor will be joining us again. So thank you again, Taylor. And you can register for those at phisigmapi.org/lunchandlearn. Again, if you have any questions, feel free to email Taylor. Her email is in the chat box. You can also email myself and I can pass those along. And that does it for today's Leadership in Action Lunch and Learn webinar. Lead on.